Other than that, keep working hard, keep studying hard, send in your questions, comments. I'm happy to help. Other than that, let's get into it. So question 1, the local coffee shop on your street is having their grand opening today. They hired a person to stand by the door and track how many customers walk in the store and order a drink. What would be the best measurement system to use in this scenario? Okay, simple measurement question to start it off. We are measuring what? Measuring how many customers walk in the store and order a drink. So if you were in this role, if you were hired by the local coffee shop to do this role, what would you be doing? You would be counting how many customers walk in the store and order a drink. What do we know about count? Well, we know count is associated with frequency. So the best answer here would be what? Frequency. Read all your question choices, okay, especially when you're practicing. Go through all the answer choices and understand why each one is wrong. If you can do that, you'll get much better at the test. So why is duration wrong? Well, we're not timing anything. We're not taking a total time of their behavior. We're simply counting. Why is IRT and latency wrong? Well, we're not measuring the time in between two behaviors or in between an SD and when they walk in the door. If we wanted to measure latency, for example, we would measure from the time they walk in the door to the time they order a drink, right? If IRT would be time in between customers ordering drinks, we're not measuring time here, right? All we're doing is counting. Therefore, our answer is frequency. Lucy had an exhausting week at work. When she was done with her shift on Friday, she wanted to go home and get to sleep early. On her way home, she received a text from her friend about a party that night. Lucy sent back, "Sounds great. What time?" Her friend responded, 8 p.m. Lucy attended the party. What is the antecedent to Lucy asking what time the party started? So pretty familiar situation, right? You're ready to get home, rest, go to sleep, and then something comes up and plans change. So what is the question asking? Okay. When we're going through the RBT exam, we want to know what is our question asking, because they can take up this situation. We can ask a bunch of different things. This question is asking about the antecedent to Lucy asking what time the party started. What do we know about antecedents? Antecedents are what happened exactly before the behavior or right before the behavior. Okay. So the nearest thing that happened just before that behavior happened. So our target behavior here is Lucy asking what time the party started. We need to figure out what happened right before that. That's going to be our antecedent. If you don't know what an antecedent is, right, you need to brush up on your vocabulary, go back through the flashcards, go back through the study guide, and get more fluent. This is why I always say being fluent in the terms and definitions is going to make your life easier when you're taking the test. If you're not fluent, you're going to have a hard time with easy questions because you're not going to know what they're asking. This is a very easy question if you know what an antecedent is and you know what they're asking. So again, what is our antecedent? What happens right before Lucy asked what time the party started? Was Lucy feeling tired after work? Well, she was assumingly feeling tired after work, right? It doesn't ever explicitly say that, but it says Lucy had an exhausting week. However, that's not what happened right before she received or right before she asked her question, right? What about Lucy receiving a text from her friend? Well, let's see. On her way home, she received a text from her friend about the party that night. Lucy sent back, "Sounds great. What time?" There you go, right? That was the antecedent. The behavior was Lucy sent a text back asking what time. The consequence was her friend responded 8 p.m. So a simple ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence scenario. No more complicated than that. Lucy going to the party happened after the text message. Lucy driving home happened before the text message, but before the actual antecedent, which was receiving the text from her friend. So be careful with antecedents and consequences. We're looking for the antecedents and the consequences that happen directly before and directly after the behavior. Okay, keep that in mind. Question 3. RBTs should prepare for data collection before their sessions begin. Which of the following items are not part of an RBT's preparation prior to session starting? Okay, so you should be ready to get to session, start session, and get rolling, right? If you have a 3-hour session, you shouldn't spend the first 15, 20 minutes setting up. You should already be ready to go. Okay, we want to use our time wisely. It's valuable to our client, to us, so we need to be ready. So when preparing for data collection, what do you need to do? Which of the following items are not part of the RBT's preparation? Okay, so it's the not question. Be careful about the nots, the excepts. Okay, these questions are asking you which answer is wrong because 3 of them are going to be right. Okay, so let's look. Should you gather necessary items for collecting data? Absolutely. If you're preparing for data collection before the sessions begin, you're going to need the items you need to collect data. If it's paper data, you're going to need pencils, you're going to need trackers. If it's computer data, you're going to need your tablet or your iPhone, whatever you use. Either way, you need necessary items. What about review notes from last session? Yes, you need to be familiar with what's happening outside of your session. If you're working as a team and there are multiple RBTs on the case, you want to know what's going on the sessions that you don't work. Okay. Was anything mastered? Any new behaviors come up? These are things you should know. You should review the notes from that previous session. What about write session notes detailing the session? Is this something you should do before the session or after? Well, you're going to write session notes after the session, right? You can't write your notes before the session begins. You need to wait to actually have your session. Now, pretty common sense, right? But it's important to understand what takes place before session, what takes place during session, and what takes place after. You're going to write your session notes detailing your session, of course, after the session has happened. And finally, reach out to the supervisor with any questions. Absolutely. That should happen before. That should happen during. That should happen after. Reaching out with questions should happen at all times. Okay. There's no specific time for that. The only specific time maybe is as soon as possible. Okay. Whenever a question comes up, you need to reach out immediately. But what is not something you do before session? Write session notes detailing the session. That happens after. Which of the following scenarios best represents consequence manipulation? Okay, so in behavior, right, we have antecedent manipulations and we have consequence manipulations. What are antecedent manipulations? Antecedent manipulations are proactive. Okay, we're trying to prevent something from happening, or we're trying to adjust the environment to get something to happen. We're doing things in the environment, we're manipulating the environment before the target behavior occurs. Consequence manipulation, the target behavior occurred, and now we're reacting to it. What are we doing in response to that target behavior occurring? That's consequence manipulation. So in this scenario, we're going to look for the situation where we are reacting, okay? Not being proactive, we're being reactive. We're looking for the consequence manipulation. So whenever a company is coming over, Anna spends extra time cleaning and preparing for her house for her guests. Okay, so Anna knows she's having guests later. What does she do before she gets there? She cleans up, she prepares her house, right? She's manipulating what's happening before her guests get there, which is she had this dirty house and now she cleans it. So when her guests get there, they see a clean house. Anna is manipulating the antecedent, right? Before her guests arrive. This is an antecedent manipulation. Jimmy knows his client seeks attention. Jimmy provides intermittent attention to his client as a form of non-contingent reinforcement. Okay, so that's a dead giveaway, right? If we are providing intermittent attention as a form of non-contingent reinforcement, okay, we're providing this reinforcement before the behavior happens, okay? Non-contingent reinforcement, don't be fooled, okay, is going to be an antecedent strategy, okay? Reinforcement is going to be a consequence strategy. Non-contingent reinforcement, okay, is antecedent manipulation because we're trying to prevent this attention-seeking strategy, this attention-seeking behavior from happening. Non-contingent reinforcement manipulates the motivating operations, okay, in an attempt to put a stop to the attention-seeking behavior before it actually happens, okay? Don't be fooled by non-contingent reinforcement. The entire staff knows that their boss comes in at 10 a.m., so at 9:45 a.m., everyone gets back to their desk and gets to work. What are they doing? Well, before their boss gets there, they're going back to their desk, they're getting to work, okay? So they want to make it appear that they've been working this whole time. Antecedent manipulation. So finally, that leaves us with Brenda is tired of her ex-boyfriend texting her. So now when he sends her a text, she does not respond. What is Brenda doing? She's in response to the text. She's theoretically putting it on extinction, right? Not responding. And this is her reacting to receiving the text message. Everything else is being proactive, okay? They're being proactive in light of their boss getting to work, being proactive in light of guests, and then Jimmy's being proactive in light of his client wanting to seek attention. Brenda is the only one reacting, okay? So hopefully you understand that question. You understand the difference between antecedent manipulation, proactive, consequent manipulation, reactive. Susie is playing dress up with her dolls. Her RBT asks her question like, where do her pants go and where do her glasses go? What type of procedure is Susie most likely using? Okay, so we're playing, maybe it's a break time, maybe it's a free play time, okay? Maybe Susie's just by herself. Her RBT is taking advantage of the situation, okay, by asking her WH questions, by asking her simple functional questions, okay? What is Susie doing? Is Susie engaging in discrete trial training? No, because there's no clear beginning, middle, end, right? There's no SD delivered. There's no consequence. Okay, we're not delivering these trials fast. Okay, it's much more natural than discrete trial training, which makes it what? That makes it incidental teaching. Susie is using naturally occurring situations, Susie playing with her dolls, okay, to ask her these questions and work on skills, right? We're not sitting at a table running trials rapidly, okay? We're simply playing with our client and using this play time as an opportunity to ask her questions and work on skills. That's naturalistic teaching, also known as incidental teaching. Stimulus transfer control is basically prompt fading. We're not prompt fading here. Man training is request training where we're training our client to ask for things. That's not happening either. We are simply working on skills in a natural setting with Susie. According to the RBT ethical codes, RBTs are responsible for which of the following? Okay, so we just have our new ethics code come out for 2022. We have our ethics section of our task list, right? So RBTs are binded by these ethical guidelines. Ethical questions on the exam, as I've told you before, are very common sense, very straightforward, okay? You want to pick the answer that is strong, but it's not too strong or too weak, okay? You just want a common sense answer, right? So this one is simply asking, what are you responsible for as an RBT? And in your situation, what do you need to do? Do you need to maintain client dignity whenever possible? Absolutely. Maintaining client dignity is arguably the most important ethical rule, right? We never want to disrespect our client. We never want to strip them of their dignity that they have a right to, okay? They're people like anybody else, regardless of the population you're working with. They have a right to dignity, to respect. We want to maintain that at all costs. What about avoid conflicts of interest with the client? Absolutely. Our interest is for the client, whatever benefits the client the most, okay? If we start taking big gifts, big monetary compensation, hanging out on the weekend, okay, our interests start to conflict with personal interest, okay, with relationship interest. Our interest should be solely on the client and them making progress and succeeding, okay? So avoid conflicts of interest, absolutely. And then report situations where abuse is suspected. Definitely, we are mandated reporters, okay? If you think something is going on, it is your duty to say something no matter what. So what are you responsible for? Well, all the above. Mary is moving out of her apartment this weekend. She does not want to pay for movers. She calls her brother and tells him, if you help me move this weekend, I will buy you and your friends lunch and pay you each $50. Mary's brother agrees. What is Mary establishing? Okay, so pretty good deal, right? You get lunch and $50. Mary doesn't want to pay for expensive movers. Okay, so how is Mary getting her brother to help? Okay, it's not out the kindness of his heart necessarily, right? I mean, he probably wants to help his sister, but this little extra is just icing on the cake. So what's the important thing here? Okay, the important thing is the order, right? If you help me move, then I will buy you lunch and pay you $50. Okay. What does that sound like? An if-then statement. What is an if-then statement? That is a contingency. Okay. Mary is establishing a contingency. If you do this, I give you this. Okay. But only if you do this. That's a contingency. Why is this not a bribe? A bribe would be giving the reinforcer first. So if Mary said, okay, I'll buy you lunch, pay you $50, then you have to help me move, that would be bribery. Okay. Bribe is when you give the reinforcer or the item, okay, before they do the target behavior or target response. In this case, the brother has to help move first, and then he gets $50 in lunch. Mary has set up a contingency. Okay. Not a preference assessment, because obviously we're not doing any sort of assessment to see what her brother likes. And there's no token economy going on. There's no exchange for a generalized condition reinforcer, right? It's a simple contingency. If you do this, then I give you this. Linda needs to determine how many of her students are working independently without being told. She decides that every 5 minutes, she will look up from her desk and count how many students are looking down at their papers. What type of measurement is Linda doing? Okay, this is a very specific type of measurement. All right. It's not often used in ABA since we work one-on-one so much. Okay. This is almost entirely a group measurement. Okay. What is Linda doing? She's set a timer. She has an interval. Okay. So that gives away what? We have an interval. Okay. We're doing some sort of discontinuous measurement. Okay. Some sort of time sampling or interval recording. So continuous measurement is obviously out. Okay. She's looking up and counting how many students are looking down at their papers, engaged in the target response. Is that partial interval recording? Well, no, with partial interval recording, okay, we're still taking data for that entire interval. Okay, we're still monitoring the behavior, right? We're just only marking a response if it happens at all. Linda isn't monitoring the entire interval. She's only monitoring that last moment at 5 minutes at the very end. That excludes whole interval as well, right? Whole interval is the same thing. You need to see, does the behavior happen the entire time? So if partial, whole, and continuous are out, that leaves us with what? Play check. Planned activity check. This is what it is, okay? It's kind of like momentary time sampling, except in this case, at the end of an interval, you look up and you count how many people are engaged in the target response. Planned activity check, also known as play check, a very specific type of discontinuous measurement, okay? A very specific type of interval recording, right? Just know this one, okay? It may not even come up on the exam, okay? But I know it is now included, right, in our discontinuous measurement. So it's good to be familiar with this type. Okay, my favorite question, if you follow my stuff, you know I've asked it a million times because I always think they're going to ask you this question on the exam, okay? I think they want you to know as the RBT what your role is. So what's your primary role of the RBT in the service delivery system? Okay, I'm going to ask this every time we do an exam, right? Is it treatment design? No, the supervisor is responsible for treatment design. What about assessment? No, you can help with assessment. It's not your primary role. What about implementation? Absolutely. The primary role of the RBT is implementation. Your job is to implement treatments, interventions, behavior plans, skill acquisition plans, first and foremost, okay? Above all else, you want to implement, okay, as your primary role. And then behavior management, extremely important, right? But that falls under what? That falls under implementation of the behavior intervention plan, okay? The implementation encompasses all of that, skill acquisition, behavior management, okay? Everything. That is your primary role as the RBT. Last question today. Brandon cuts the grass every Saturday. He has a lawnmower with that he has to pull to start. Sometimes his lawnmower starts the first pull. Sometimes it starts the second pull, and sometimes it starts third pull, but it never takes more than 3 pulls. What reinforcement schedule best represents starting the lawnmower? So if you've ever seen this, right, you've got the lawnmower, you've got the cord, you pull the cord, okay, to get the lawnmower to start. Sometimes it starts the first time, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, what does Brandon have to do? Well, he's got to pull the cord until the lawnmower starts. He knows it might happen the first time, but it never takes more than 3. So what reinforcement schedule are we talking about? Well, first determine, are we talking about a ratio schedule or an interval schedule? Well, ratio is based on what? Responses. Interval is based on time. Is this a time thing with the lawnmower? No, it's a response thing, okay? No matter how long Brandon waits after his first pull and it doesn't start, it's not going to start, okay? It's got nothing to do with time, so we can immediately eliminate interval. That leaves us with ratio or response. So we have an FR2 or a VR2. Well, FR we know is what? Fixed. That means if this was a fixed ratio, 2, the lawnmower would start every second pull every time. We know that's not the case though. Sometimes it's the first, sometimes it's the second, sometimes it's the third, okay? So we've eliminated all 3. That leaves us with a VR2, but how do we get that 2 number? How do we know it's the variable number, okay? Well, remember, variable just means an average, okay? So if you take your 1 response, you add your 2 response, you add your 3 response, you divide it by the total, you get 2. The lawnmower on average starts every second pull on average, and that's what variable means, okay? So the reinforcement schedule that represents the lawnmower is VR2. This is a great basic reinforcement schedule question, so I hope you understand that. If you don't, review it a few times until you do. Other than that, that's going to wrap it up for today, okay? We've got 10 more questions coming next week. We also have our BCBA material down the pipeline, so be on the lookout for that. We're very excited for that to help you start your BCBA journey, especially if you have been training for the RBT exam with us. We can't wait to get you on the path towards BCBA certification. So be on the lookout for that. Any questions, comments, please email me or leave them below. Happy to help. Other than that, enjoy your day, enjoy your holiday, keep studying hard, and I'll see you soon.